Hey Dojo friends, you're in a real treat today. I had the opportunity to interview my friend Hardee Hakutoshi Merritt, who I've known for a couple decades now. Hardee is a true warrior in every sense of the word. He has taken the arts of toshindo, ninjutsu, bujinkan, and jujitsu, and he has melded them together into his own kind of brand of martial arts that he's really, really good at. We talked about the hurricane, we talked about running a school, challenges from jujitsu and classical martial arts, and how Hardee has managed to kind of ride that wave and make this something that is his own. Aside from being a high-level black belt martial art in Toshindo, he's also a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu under Roy Dean. And it was my true pleasure to interview Hardee from North Carolina. This is part 1 of 2. Enjoy. How are people on the other side of the state from that terrible hurricane and flooding that happened? The videos that I've seen have been horrific, especially people that are living on the river. Have you been affected by that, or do you know people, because it's not too far from you, that have been affected?
We're fortunate here in Chapel Hill. We're a couple hours east from where it was heavily affected, but where we hold Mountain Quest, when we do now we've got Mountain Quest, and then we have 2 Tengu training events that we host up in the mountains, and that's on the edge of the area that really was affected heavily. And I'm going to head up this weekend. I'm heading up tomorrow afternoon to scout the trails. I've spoken with some guys near the property and said the trails have been sort of decimated, and I want to see the river that we use has a couple of waterfall sites that we've held different like rites of passage and things over the last almost 3 decades now.
Wow.
And yeah, the waterfall might not be there anymore. Boulders may have shifted. Every year, trees fall into the river, so just about every year beforehand, we have to go in with chainsaws and open the trails back up and make sure that the landscape's always changing up there. But I mean, this was biblical level flooding. Further west is a town called Asheville, and I have several
Mm.
friends that are there. I have a friend who runs a jujitsu school, and he's got like 5 or 6 of his students are all living in the school with him because the school
Wow.
itself still had power, so they were able to like hunker down. But just talking with him about the challenges of daily life, they're not operating as a dojo. It's just sort of a base of operations, and they've been recruited to do some security work because there's people are getting desperate and things are happening, and you're not necessarily according to him, we're not getting the full picture of the level of destruction and the level of desperation that people are experiencing. So yeah, our hearts go out to those guys. I was just received a message from a bujinkan friend of mine, Carl Koch, who runs a school in Durham, about putting on a benefit seminar to see if we can raise some money to send some stuff out, because the reaction has been strong early on, but you get a couple of weeks after these things, and sometimes it cools off a little bit, and people still are in need. So they're sort of telling folks to like not come up with big trucks of supplies right now, because cases of water are sitting out in the sun and they're not getting distributed the way. So then there's UV damage. Some of the it's just now starting to get organized, and I guess the time will tell what the real effect of this will be. But fortunately, here in Chapel Hill, we stayed relatively safe. We had some wind, we had a little bit of flooding around here, but nothing on that level.
From the videos I've seen, because I try to stay away from the media, which will spin stuff and attack anyone that's giving any help, I've seen, people that lived on the river, and the emotion I felt, because they're like, look, everything's gone. The river's gone, and they're still looking for people who are unaccounted for. And they're like, no, these people are buried under the mud. And they said the exact same thing you did, which was, we're getting a lot of help right now from FEMA or whoever, locals mostly, of course, because they need to build roads to get to them. And they're like, it's the long term, like you said, the long term we're worried about, because short term, everyone throws some money, they throw some food, and then they go back. And now they're focusing on the hurricane that just hit Tampa. And it's as Americans, we're so terrible at what's the next thing, what's the next thing, and we can't hold focus. So I feel so bad for the people that I know I've contributed to the hurricane there. I don't know where it's going. I don't know if the Red Cross gives 100% of their funds, but I think the locals are going to have to take over more than anybody because they're the ones that know the terrain. They know how to fix the roads. I mean, I was watching videos of train tracks upside down and no access bridges. And it's such a beautiful area of the country, but it's anyone who is in those valleys was just kind of wiped out. I'm like, oh my God, how are we going to help these people? I think people want to help, but we're so limited in our scope, what we can do.
Yeah, and the mountains are beautiful and sort of mercifully it's been warm, but this week it's taken a turn to start to get cold. It can get quite cold up there. You can get real winter weather up there, and people are months and months to years away from having solid infrastructure back. So yeah, it's getting ready to be interesting.
Now, this can correlate with the symbol that you and I have lived with all our lives, which is the nin symbol, right? Which is patience, endurance. Stuff like that really puts life into perspective that even though we're doing martial arts, you and I have a unique brotherhood in that we actually run schools. Most of the people I talk to in the martial arts have a small training group, one or two students. They don't have a business to run, something out of their house or garage or basement or something. And I wanted to get in a little while I wanted to pick your brain about some of the business side of a martial arts school because it's very difficult, as you know. We can work 14-hour days just to keep the bills and the lights on and student retention, things like that. But before I go there, I wanted to ask you personally how you got first involved in the martial arts, as I'm sure a kid. Was it from like a book or a movie or a television series? Like what sparked your interest in martial arts in general?
The first thing that I can remember was being a kid, kindergarten. I think like
Mhm.
1984 for me was the year that G.I. Joe came out,
Oh
the
yeah, I
cartoon.
loved it.
And Snake Eyes was this
Yeah.
character. He didn't know what he looked like. Yeah, never made any sound, but he had a sword and an Uzi and a wolf, and I just it looked perfect, right? And that sparked the whole idea of this like ninja warrior. There was an alter ego or sort of a bad guy version, Storm Shadow, and they had this Asian wisdom and this lore that they had. So they were, coming at things from an elevated perspective. They were absolutely savage on the battlefield. They, again, sort of quiet. I
Yeah.
never wanted to be in. I never considered myself overly witty or anything, so I'm not a comedian. I try to be a little bit soft spoken. Sometimes I get in my pulpit, but um, so a lot of that resonated with me. And fortunately, growing up at that point, we didn't have the internet, but it was the ninja boom. So magazines, soap operas had ninjas
Yeah.
in them. If you opened a grocery store, instead of a clown at the front, sometimes there'd be a ninja there. I lived really close to a very large military base in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I lived in like an hour away from that. But when we would go to town for things, if we
Mm.
went to the mall or something, we would go to Fayetteville. And there were, because of the proximity of the military base, there was like martial arts dojos. There were, shops and bookstores and things like that that would have these magazines. So there was Black Belt magazine, there was Ninja magazine. I split a membership to the like American Ninja Society with a buddy of mine. I think I put in $12 and he put in like 12, $13, and we split a membership card. So put my first name on it and his last name on it so we could
I
use
remember
it.
that society. Yeah.
And we would buy ninja suits and play ninja dress up. And I had all of Mr. Hayes's books. I um, was really taken by the Bruce Lee fighting method books. So we would
Yeah.
use, it was like a green and a blue one. And Ashita Kim books, sort of
Yeah.
embarrassing to me, but I had all of them. If it had ninja on it, I had it. And there was a local Kempo karate place in my hometown, but I live a little bit outside of town. It was tricky to get in there, and just wasn't in the cards for me to do that. So we would practice as best we could. We had VHS tapes of an Aki Jiu-Jitsu. We had an Aki Jiu-Jitsu video that we rented from a rental place that I probably still have. I probably never returned it, but fortunately that place is out of business, and the statute of limitations is long past.
I did that with the
Um,
Shokusugi master class. I don't know if you remember Shokusugi stuff. I mean,
Absolutely.
every movie that came out, Ninja 3, The Domination, Revenge of the Ninja, all
Classic.
we would do, we would walk to the video store almost every day, rent it, forget to rewind it, bring it back, and then 2 days later, people would be renting other things, and I'm like, I want to get that Enter the Ninja again. It was
Hmm.
so cool. And then when he came out with Masterclass, which was basically him doing his stunt work in a nice temple
Hmm.
and saying, "Hey, you can do it with me," and his kids beating each other up. But the attraction of that, and like you said, when I found the ninjutsu book by Mr. Hayes at a Kmart in Brockton, which was, like you said, 10 miles from where we lived. And I said to my mom, that's what I want to be. I saw him in that Ichimonji with the foot cut off at the bottom. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I want to be that. She's like, no, we can't afford that. It's 10.95 for that book. But it's so I remember G.I. Joe back then. I remember watching it, but I never really got into G.I. Joe, but he's been around for decades.
Hmm.
Do you know when they added Snake Eyes into the lore? Was that earlier or was it just for the Ninja Boom? Did they create him to make more money, do you think?
There was a series on Netflix. I think it was called like The Toys We Loved or something. And they
Yeah.
told the story of it, and they had this figure, and they just painted it all black just to see how it would go. And Snake Eyes or G.I. Joe was one of those series back then that was almost like there was a toy line first, and they built a show around it to help sell the toy. And this like all black figure became the most popular toy that they had. They had like, yeah, just put like a helmet on them, didn't do a face. They just wanted an extra character, and it took off. And so, as I understand, I probably saw the cartoon well before I had the action figures. But I remember laying on my grandma's floor after school, laying there on my belly watching GI Joe,
You
and
remember watching Thundercats?
hmm
The guy in the blue, he was like a cat creature and he had the nunchaku, remember? I think.
hand
And there was a
throw.
girl, I think, that had a staff or something, but all those shows
All
kind of
right.
hit in the 80s because they were making big money. And like you,
Absolutely.
we would literally get anything we could. I used my dad's golf clubs because he was a golfer at the time, and I cut the head off of the irons, and you had these shiny weapons, and of course you'd beat the hell out of your neighbors, and me and my brother would go out. But I was the only, we were freak kids. I'm sure you were. Like the neighbors were like, "What the hell are these guys doing? Dressed up in a ninja suit in the middle of a hot day, throwing shuriken at a tree." My neighbors always looked at me weird. I'm sure they did with you. And then eventually everyone dropped away and I'm still by myself. I'm like, I still want to do this. And that's when I found a karate school, Weichidu in Brockton. I don't know. It was so far away. And I begged my parents, can I go to that school? And finally they let me join at like age 13. And then I found Mark Davis about 15 or 16. And I was always with Mr. Hayes with the Masubi Journal way back when and Hatsumi's Tetsuzan. Um, did you do a martial art before you got into, I'm gonna use the word ninjutsu as a broad term. Did you always start with another martial art and get into that, or did you go right into it?
My buddy who lived across the street, his dad was a Green Beret and had some sort of maybe Kyokushin, some sort of hard style karate background. He didn't really teach us, but he didn't stop us from doing things. He bought us a heavy bag. So we had a heavy bag hanging up in his garage. And again, I had free access to all the books through this guy and through the videos that we could get. My parents said, I'm not going to give you money, but you can buy whatever you want with your own money. So at 10 years old, I started mowing grass and,
Yeah.
just worked for my ninja addiction, and I did it. So I had that level of instruction, no formal training. And I walked into the doors of what was then the NC Quest Center, and very early 98. I walked
Dr.
in.
Stack, was he running it?
Dr. Stack was the owner, and there was a gentleman named William Johnson who was the
Yeah.
lead instructor. Yep. And so I walked in, first formal training. I was delivering pizzas back in my hometown, like an hour away. So I took extra shifts, and I would come up and just try to stay all day. There was a 10 a.m. class, I remember, and I would drive up, do the 10 a.m. class, and then just hang out. I would sweep the mat. I would, Mr. Johnson would, he got tired of me asking him questions, so he would show me how to tie a different knot, and I would sit over in the corner of the mat and just practice tying knots, right? Or I would practice. I would see him teaching some of the more advanced class, and I would go over and just practice what he was doing. And Dr. Stack, Mr. Johnson, those guys took notice, I guess, that I was here. There was a need because there were some younger kids that were coming in, and while I was here, I would just try to keep the kids on task, even if some of them were a belt or two higher than me. And so Dr. Stack offered me a job, and I was in a sort of going nowhere community college sort of track, just still figuring out what I was going to do. So I jumped on it, and as quickly as I could, moved up here and started working, and really quickly shifted into a full-time thing. And that was like my first introduction. It's still here. It's still this place 28 years ago now.
Yeah, you're one of those people. Let me gush on you a bit. I've probably known you since the early 2000s, but you were quiet as was I. We weren't the ones who were out in the front by any means, because there were people that was their role. But the reason why I so respect you, even to this day, always, is because you walk the walk. You don't just talk the talk. You're running a full-time school. You broke ranks, so to speak, to go and master jujitsu. I know there's no such thing as mastering it, but you're doing it, you're teaching it, black belt in it, which is such a high accomplishment. And you were one of those people that whenever anyone was in a backroom discussion, Hardee, everyone's like, oh, I love Hardee. He's so good. But you were so humble. You still are now. And that's what's so good about you, is you're not arrogant, which is just prevalent in the martial arts. You're very humble, and you're always forever and always student. I think a lot of us that, I think you'll agree with this, is because we joined when we were kids, I had low self-esteem, and I needed something to help me, a hero, which was a ninja back then, or a samurai, to establish who I was as a person, an identity. And for me, it was Shokosugi, it was Toshiro Mifune and Shogun, because I'm older than you. So I had David Carradine in the 70s. But I still feel that way, like I'm not worthy of this martial art. I'm always a student, but I always feel like it's not my place to be a leader of anything. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think, and that's why I think people like yourself and Hakeem, Brian, James, all these guys we came up through our childhood with this attraction. That's why I still believe we're still here and we haven't quit. I think if we had come in our 20s or 30s later in life, we wouldn't be doing this still. And Mr. Hayes, when I was talking to him, was like, you have to keep a little bit of that fantasy aspect or you will quit. It's too hard. What do you think about that?
Oh, first, I want to say thank you for the nice things that you said. I feel very much the same about you. I always appreciated being around you and your energy. You obviously were very skilled, but you also didn't come in and try to kick the door in and say, "Look at me," and that means a lot to me. The humility and the humbleness that was what I perceive to be preached by traditional martial arts values is something that I think is important. I think it's something that we should strive for. And like you said, it's not as common in the martial arts world when you get somebody that's got some rank or is running a school or something like that. So I appreciate that. I do agree you have to keep the fantasy with it, and you have to keep looking for the magic in what you're doing because you find it, right? You find this like subtle position where somebody goes to hit you and they push themselves away, and that's magic. You find that spot where you get somebody hopping to keep their balance, and then you can sweep their foot and they're absolutely weightless, and it's magic. And that's what keeps me coming, is finding all those things where not the magic silver bullet technique. I see a lot of people get really hung up on that. They want to learn the thing that's going to let them win a fight no matter what, or they want that ultimate technique or training method or whatever. And I think it comes down to like discipline's curiosity. You have to maintain and work that curiosity. You have to keep looking under every stone, trying out every technique, every different angle, and see what works. So I agree wholeheartedly. The fantasy, the fantasy has to drive the curiosity. You have to love it. And I say this to the people that come in and work with me here at the dojo, like if you are not getting something from this, if this isn't feeding your soul, it will drain you. It will absolutely rip it out because you're constantly serving. You're constantly watching other people, helping other people with their own discoveries, building up other people's confidence. I similar thing to what you described. I probably didn't have the biggest self-esteem coming in. Had some things in my life that happened that made me search for a way to be stronger and to be more competent and confident. And I think that's what draws a lot of people into martial arts. And that's one of the best things about martial arts, is that it can do that for you. But yeah, if you're not getting something from it, if you don't maintain that shoshin, that beginner's mind, and that spirit of exploration, it'll chew you up and beat you up and spit you out. It's not the easiest way to like get in shape. It's not the easiest. Like it can be hard on your body if you train the wrong way or with the wrong spirit.
It's hell on your body. I mean, last night in class we were working on a Kopoken, because we're trying to go through. My goal the last 5 years was to do the Tenchi Jin chart from the bujinkan from start to finish, nonstop, one line per hour per week. And we're on our 5th year without stopping. We only took like 2-3 Tuesdays off for Christmas, I think. And we have been going through that chart for 4 or 5 years nonstop. Of course, students come and go and the old timers are still there. I'm like, I want to not master, I want to know that chart inside and out. I still don't. But we were laughing in class last night because we were smashing each other with these little Kopoken. And at the end of class, I said, now who has bruises? And everyone's showing, not from that night, but just in general.
Mhm.
People don't realize the chronic pain that a martial artist is always in. You're always hurt somehow. You're torn here. I have a ripped bicep for the last 2 months. Bruises everywhere, but we laugh about it because we're a family. And when kid comes up, I got a bruise, Mr. Norcross, and he's looking for me to kind of pat him on the back. I'm like, cool. Do you have any more? No, but I'm like, that's cool. Show your friends that. That means you're training. You're really living. I always say, if you're in pain, you're alive. I think pain is your best friend in the martial arts because life is pain. And if you can take a hit to the face or a broken bone or all the surgeries I've been through, it's like nothing affects me now. That's what you were talking about, the Shoshin. Well, the Fudo Shin comes next. You have to be able to endure anything in life, because when you get that, what your loved one gets diagnosed with cancer tomorrow, or you do. We have to know how to handle that in the most graceful way possible. And that through the martial arts, I have seen hundreds, if not early thousands of people toughen up, grow grit. I see the young kids nowadays that so many of them are desperate for direction and desperate for a role model. And I'm seeing the magic kids that are here that are growing and becoming college graduates and leaders of business, and they're not afraid to go out and ask the pretty girl on the date. They're confident. And when they walked in, they had none of that. And I'm like, this is the magic, you and I, that we have the privilege of sharing with the world, or at least our community. And it's open to anybody. But the fact that we can run a school and directly see our work in progress with the youth becoming adults. What possible better job can you and I have in the world? I don't think it exists.
No. Going through the COVID situation 3, 4 years ago, where it was sort of at its height. We were shut down for a long time. We were doing classes in the parking lot and trying to do things over Zoom. And I had a real honest discussion with myself and my wife. What does this look like if this isn't a path we can follow anymore? What other job can I do? And it was a dark night of the soul, many nights laying up in bed thinking like, what's my alternative? What am I going to do
Yeah.
otherwise? And I couldn't come up with anything that would provide me with the same level of like fulfillment. I don't work. I will do some work. I'll go in the office and I'll, look at the insurance thing, or I'll go try to figure out a staff situation, or I'll go, there's some worky parts to it, but like, I don't say like, oh, I got to go to work today. It's like, no, I get to go to the dojo today. I get to go see my friends. I get to go work on my fitness. I get to go make myself more capable. And you were talking about, the things in life, that's the first of those four noble truths is, there's going to be some pain in your life. I heard a great quote that working out and getting beat up all the time is hard. Growing old and like hurting anyway, just because you're old, that's hard. So you get to pick your hard, right?
Yeah.
It's like, saving money and being financially responsible and all that. That's hard. Being poor is really hard. So everything's going to be hard, but if you can pick your hard, then you can at least try to get the fulfillment out of the positive ways that we're doing. So yeah, even if martial arts can beat you up, I'm on a mission personally to like, as part of the training that we facilitate here, give people effective recovery methods. So we're doing some yoga after classes. We're training. We're spending some time. Like I'm spending time talking about nutrition. We're spending time talking about how much sleep people are getting. We've had a big shift of a lot of our members shift into a particular heart rate monitor that measures their recovery level and their HRV in the morning, so that people are monitoring it. Because, we used to teach things. I used to teach things like a seminar. We're going to come into class. I'm going to teach you 5 or 6 techniques and work on that. Next week, we'll work on something different. And there were some dedicated people, likely folks like you and I, that would go find somebody else and we would drill it and we would work on it and come back. But what I see our clients now, when they come in, this is where they're going to work on things. This is where they're going to train. So even I've sort of changed the language. I don't even say like teaching class. We say facilitating training. We're facilitating training today. This is the technique that we're going to train, but we're going to warm up. We're going to work on those technical skills. We're going to work on those physical attributes, and then we're going to pay attention to proper recovery after, so we can come back in and we can do it again. And we've had some exciting results from that, and as a more holistic approach. And it's been necessary because of the addition of jujitsu to our curriculum, because that is sort of notorious for really beating your body up. And I want to change that paradigm. And we are a place that's great because we have a lot of smaller and older people that are in here training jujitsu with the 16 to 25-year-olds. So it's, I think it can be done the right way, and I'm on a mission to make sure that we get smarter about how we facilitate that training.
That's another thing I've always admired about you is your athleticism, and of course doing jujitsu. It's so good for you as far as calorie burning and keeping you flexible. But I know that I have several jujitsu friends that run academies, and like it's hell on your body, and even we can't keep even young strong guys in because they're not used to pain, and in a month they're gone. I wanted to ask you about jujitsu, especially because it's the number one thing out there. It's blown away everything else. And obviously with martial arts, it's a cycle, it's a wheel, and at some point jujitsu will do this. But you were so into it. I remember you being a ground fighting expert in toshindo. This is 20 plus years ago. And how much, because I do toshindo, I do bujinkan, and both sides dislike me because I'm not dedicated to this group, and I'm kind of my own island doing our own brand of stuff. I combine the two because I believe there's value in both. And when you do that, you get attacked by both sides secretly, mostly. And then behind closed doors, they respect you for leaving the tribe and expanding your bounds. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have really taken over the jujitsu side, adding it into Toshindo. Can you tell me, as someone who hasn't done that, how hard that has been? It must be a daily challenge for you to fight the politics of both sides, saying, "Well, why do you want to do that dumb ninja stuff?" And then your ninja friend's like, "Why do you want to get on the ground? That's not self-defense." How do you balance all of this? Because you're literally at the forefront of it. I'm curious, as a martial art instructor to another instructor, how do you fight that battle?
It's a battle that we fight. I like you said, I hear it from both sides. My jujitsu friends are, sort of turn their head a little bit when I start talking about using Tai Jitsu, and the Tai Jitsu friends are like, "Well, jujitsu is not really self-defense." And I'm a I'm a big fan of martial arts, and I love it all. I like a spear. I like practicing with my pistol. I like getting in and fighting on the ground. Spending time looking at takedowns. And for me, it's an opportunity to sort of holistically or approach everything from every angle. So there's so much context that can happen in self-defense situations. Like maybe you're by yourself and somebody comes up and you've got to, break contact with them and get away, and that's great. Maybe you wake up at home and somebody's in your bedroom and your kids are in the other room and you can't break contact and run away. You got to win that fight right there, which would probably include, taking the person down and either damaging them or controlling them when they're on the ground. So you look at classical traditions like the Takagi Yoshinryu. I did a little bit deeper digging, and they've got cross collar chokes, and they've got arm locks, and they've got sacrifice throws. It was a jujitsu school, from what I can tell. Yeah. So that gave me, some places to start. I was exposed really early to John Poliquin, the founder of the Discovery Martial Arts Group up in New England, and he was a major inspiration for me. He was one of the first people that talked about being on the ground. I saw toe holds and heel hooks with him before I knew what a toe hold or a heel hook was. My teacher, Dr. Stack, when he got his 5th degree from Anshu Hayes, he was sort of tasked with a Musha Shugyo to go out and bring something back. And he connected with a guy named Stephen Crawford
Steve Crawford, yeah.
Yeah, so I saw a video on your channel of some guys at your school going over what we call the 30 ground flow drill. Yeah. And I was there with Dr. Stack as he was learning it, and got a chance to train with Steve Crawford. When I did my MMA fights, Steve Crawford was the guy that put me into the fighting circuit there. It wasn't even legal in North Carolina to do it back then. So we had to go out to fight. And so all of those things, Dr. Stack sort of started me on the path at the school. A jiu-jitsu school opened sort of nearby, and we were talking earlier about how much I appreciate the humility of that's talked about in Japanese martial arts. And my exposure to Brazilian jiu-jitsu was the absolute opposite. It was a lot of bravado and machismo, and the Gracie in action fights were a big thing. They just were fighting on the beach and beating everybody up, and it was very different. And I wasn't necessarily a fan of that, and was intimidated. I wanted to go see how would I do, what do I need to learn to make sure that these guys don't come in and disrupt what we've got going on in our dojo. And through a little bit of time, I fell in love with jiu-jitsu. And the thing that gets me in trouble is I stopped seeing the differences and I started seeing the similarities. I started seeing the synergies. There is Tai Jitsu in Jiu-Jitsu. Yes, you can do it in a brutal way. You can charge in and wrap somebody up and bump them down and use aggression and that sort of thing. And that does work to a point, but at the higher levels, you see real subtlety, like real mastery of balance taking and momentum maintenance and utilization. You see misdirection. You see the ability to get somebody locked up where they're in a trap and they don't know which way to go. And so all of these same principles and qualities that I for years talked about at the higher levels of toshindo absolutely are in application in jujitsu. So through those similarities and through that training, it just naturally sort of amalgamated in my Tai Jitsu. And, you know, I want to be able to take somebody down and go into a knee on belly position, and I could hit them. I could use a shuto, or I could sneak in and set up a collar choke or something like that. And the more my eyes opened to that, the more I saw it in the Tai Jitsu world. There's many video clips of Hatsumi Sensei taking somebody down and going right into that knee on belly position. I've seen a clip of an Austin, Texas seminar in 1993 where Mr. Hayes was teaching a mount escape. In 93, that was the year, I believe, the first UFC came out, where Hoist Gracie sort of showed the world. So if Hayes is showing a mount escape in 93 and Hoist is sort of introduced, you know, jujitsu to me, then, you know, that says a lot about being able to practice this. Now, there's name brand stuff, and I'm sensitive to that. If you're a teacher or you're selling a course, you're selling a class, you've got your name on a style, I get it, and I'm sensitive to it. And but I'm just looking for the cohesive. Mr. Hayes on the interview with you said that at this point he's kind of teaching non-denominational martial arts.
Yeah.
And you know, that's what I'm looking for. I want bottom line effective technique that's going to work. And I reserve the right to be wrong and to change my mind later on. Like if I go down some path and something isn't the way that I thought it was going to be, or I'm proven wrong by something different, like I make people around me crazy about how quickly I'll change my mind. Like, no, I don't like that anymore. I want to do it this way, or I'm going to switch over to this. But you know, we're all works in progress. So I don't want to come out and say, like, this is the way to do it. This is the only way to do it. This is the best way to do it. This is just the way I'm doing it right now.